All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Lasting Learning Podcast. So glad you're here. In just a second, you are going to be so glad that you are here as well, because today on the show, we've got a guest who's one of those rare guests that will light a fuel in you that is probably going to surpass anything that you've ever felt before. He's going to inspire you to go out there and do something that you've never done before. The guest we have on today is a guy that I actually just heard on a podcast about 2 weeks ago. I heard his episode and I was completely floored. He got me through a tough workout. He got me fired up. He got me motivated. Outside of like David Goggins, his story right now is like epic and it's inspirational and it's resonating in my mind. We've got a guy on who works a full-time job as a VP and COO of Drury Hotels. We've got a guy who is out there killing it as a family man and just doing his thing. And he's out there running races of 200 plus miles at a time. You heard that right. 200 plus miles at a time. Insane. I know, but you'll hear all about it in just a second. Today, we've got Eric Strand on with us. Eric, thank you so much for finding the time in that crazy schedule to talk to little old me.
Hey, Dave, thanks very much for the very kind introduction. My wife's going to listen to that and say, who's he talking about?
Or she's going to say, yep, I made him everything he is, right?
Well, and she did. That'd be the truth.
That's awesome. So, Eric, outside of that stuff I talked about a little bit, can you just explain who you are, introduce yourself to the world that might not know you yet?
Sure. Eric Strand. I live in St. Louis, Missouri, grew up in Minnesota, and actually spent a couple of years in Ann Arbor, not too far from where you're at. And moved down to St. Louis over 30 years ago. We raised our family down here, and I've been in the hotel business for almost 40 years at this point, and have always been a runner, but didn't really get serious about it in terms of distance until I turned 39. I had just finished up my grad degree at Washington University, and had, your whole life when you're going through the academics, as you've been through, is really just kind of study, eat, sleep, and work. And found that there was just a lot of time that opened up after that, and decided to start working on one of my bucket list items, which was to go run a marathon at that point. And it was going to be a kind of a one and done, and it turned into a little bit more than that down the road.
So I got to ask, we'll start with that moment right there, because we're going to talk a lot about running. Because for some people, they hear that people run and they just think they're crazy if they run around the block. What you do is I would say it's crazy, but it's so stinking cool. When I ran my first marathon, at the finish line, I was in a fetal position, crying, literally sobbing. Just the emotion and the physical drain, I was done. And I vowed that I was going to retire and I was never going to run another marathon. And obviously that didn't stick. For you, after you finished that bucket list and you said, okay, I've checked it off, why did you get up and keep going?
Well, a lot of people liken it to childbirth, I guess, is that after a while you forget the tough stuff and then decide that, it wasn't so bad. And I think it was that way to a certain extent, but I had the same tears to a certain extent, and not so much from pain, but just the sheer joy of finishing a really epic goal that I'd had. And then there were more tears after my kids told me that there were 3 70-year-olds that beat me. So I realized at that point, because I did it when I was 39 years old, and I thought, well, I want to do this before I'm 40. But it was really an eye-opener at that point, that this could be more of a lifestyle and something you could do for a long, long time. And I loved the feeling of accomplishment of finishing the race, crossing the finish line. But even more than that, I liked the process before. I loved the training, the discipline that went into it, the small goals that you had to hit every single day to get yourself ready for it. And also just really have enjoyed the camaraderie, the community around these races, the marathons, and now the ultras. You're just surrounded by these people that come from all walks of life, but you have this one thing in common, and you know so much about them, even though it's just through the running.
It really is like a fraternity, and the race is the hazing to get you in. You got to take the beating in order to have the fellowship and the friendship, which it's amazing. It's interesting to me. When I introduced you, I talked about the full-time jobs that you have and the responsibilities and the role that you have in corporate America, in the hotel industry. And you also talk about the process involved in going out there and running. Right now, we're just talking about a marathon, and I'm saying just a marathon, which is crazy to even say that. But running the 26.2 miles, taking that 3.5 to 4.5, 5 hours out of a Saturday or a Sunday to run the marathon, that's one thing. But the training that goes into it is a whole nother animal, and the time commitment. How do you balance all that? How do you find the time to be husband, father, employer, employee, runner? How does that all fit together?
Well, a lot of it is what you're going to say no to. So the things that you might have done before, which is maybe going out and eating too much pizza and having a couple beers, or watching TV, or those kinds of things end up going away. So you replace those, and then also work to balance it with family responsibilities. And at the time that I started training for my first marathon, we had 3 kids that were all in either middle school or high school. And so a lot of it was just setting the alarm for 4 a.m. and getting it done before getting back, and then making breakfast for the kids and getting them on the bus. So it was just trying to fit it in where it didn't take me away from those other responsibilities more than anything else.
And I guess I want to kind of frame this too. Waking up at 4 a.m. is not enjoyable. Oftentimes those training runs, not enjoyable. And yet you're sacrificing beer, pizza, TV time for that. There has to be something bigger that drives you other than going out there and just torturing your body. Or is that what you like? Do you just like that physical challenge?
No, it's not so much the masochism, although there's probably a part of it, I guess, for all of us that are in the endurance running or cycling or whatever it might be. But I think it's knowing it's part of a healthy lifestyle, that you're doing something that is good for you. And a lot of times, doing things that are good for you aren't always pleasant. But there were times, you always go out on a run hoping it will be that 1 out of 10 runs where you have that runner's high and you're just floating and you feel fantastic. And I think you're always kind of looking for that next one. And there's a nice stroke to the ego when you finish well in a race and you have a good run and they put the medal around you and you start going further distances than you ever thought you could. And I think also too, another big part of it was other people are always watching. And I don't mean that from an ego gratification standpoint, but like each of my kids who grew up thinking running was the dumbest thing in the world and would never do that, have all done distance events. So my daughter's done half marathons. I had another son that did a marathon, Chicago Marathon. And then I have another son who has gone further than that and has actually done the ultras with me and did the Leadville 100 3 years now.
Oh, that's
so,
awesome.
And he's the one that thought I was the dumbest. So they're always watching, and I kind of knew that, but you have to take that on faith to a certain extent.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I equate it to like golf. I'm a horrible golfer, but I love going out there because in any round of 18, when you hit 100 balls, there's going to be one that you take back and you remember. I mean, you've got 99 others that went in the water and the sand trap or whatever, but there's that one that gets you back out there the next time. And it's sort of like that with running. There are some runs that are just going to be brutal. I had one of those today. The humidity got to me. My legs were sore and I was complaining in my head, but tomorrow might be better. So I need to go tomorrow to see if it's going to be better. And that's kind of what I hear you saying. You are out there on that quest for that moment.
And if I had even one good shot on the golf course, I might have taken up golf. But that was another thing I gave up because I certainly wasn't very good at it.
But and golf is a lot more expensive than running, so there's that as well. So we talked about. I said just a marathon, as though it's small potatoes. But in your world, I mean, just a marathon is probably more apropos. I could go down the resume of all of the marathons you've run. I'll do that just a little bit. Tell me if any of these are inaccurate. 12 Boston marathons, is that right? Mm-hmm. 12. Just take that in consideration. I've run one, and it was like the pinnacle of my life. And you've done 12. The 8 Leadville 100s, is that accurate as well?
Right.
Oh my gosh, let's talk about Leadville real quick so people can get that perspective. What is the Leadville 100?
Sure. Leadville it starts in Leadville, Colorado, which is the highest incorporated town in the United States at 10,152 feet, and goes up from there. It was started back in, I think, 1983 by a gentleman named Ken Klober. Ken was a hard rock miner, and they shut all the mines down in 1981, 1982, which was sustaining Leadville. Unemployment shot up over 20%, and he was trying to figure out a way to save his city. So what he did, he was a marathoner, and he decided to lay out one of the gnarliest courses for a 100-mile race because a marathon wasn't long enough. You needed people to come into town who had to stay overnight and spend money in the restaurants. So he put together this tremendous course, and I think they probably had about 40 people that ran it the first year. And over time, it has just built up this legacy of being one of the most challenging races out there. And I think historically, only about 47% of the people that start the race will actually make it back to the finish in 100 miles under 30 hours, which is the cutoff, which is a pretty tight cutoff actually. And so I loved the idea of that challenge. I love the mountains. It's beautiful out there. And I wanted to see what would happen trying to run without oxygen.
How do you train for something like that? Being a Missouri guy, how do you say, I'm going to train for 10,000 foot elevation and 100 miles?
Well, a couple things. One, you mentioned that you had your run today with the high humidity and the heat.
Yeah.
And actually, there's something called oxygen density where, if you have 90 degrees, 90% humidity, it's kind of like being at altitude. But, and I mentioned this to Angie and Trevor, who you referenced earlier on the Marathon Training Academy, but I think so much more of it is mental. It comes down to, you're not going to run the same at 10,000 feet as you will at sea level. It just takes much more oxygen. You have 40% less oxygen up at that level than what we're breathing right now. And so you have to wrap your mind around the fact that you're not going to go as fast, and you have to deal with the panic that, you run 100 yards and all of a sudden you're sucking wind, you feel awful. And so a thing I've learned is, you have to put in the long distance runs, but it's really much more about managing your mind and dealing with that panic and just realizing that it's going to be tougher. And so you kind of suck it up, Buttercup.
And so you said I wanted to explore the challenge of it just to see what it was like. And you did that 8 times. Why do you keep going back?
The challenge, and I'm kind of a streaker like that in terms of
Yeah.
Boston. I keep wanting to qualify and go back there each year. Grandma's Marathon, which was my very first marathon, I've done 20 times in a row. I keep going back every year. And
And is that in Wisconsin? Is that right?
It's in Minnesota.
Minnesota.
It's
Okay.
right across from Wisconsin, right across from Superior, Wisconsin.
Okay.
In Duluth, runs along Lake Shore of Lake Superior, North Shore there. It's absolutely gorgeous. But Leadville was one of those too, and I thought it'd be one and done. But I finished first of all, which most first timers don't really do. And I started to just really get into the community. The people that run those races are just incredible, and they're inspirational, and they're just fun to be around, and they make you do things more than what you thought you could do. So I liked that, wanted more of it. And the other thing too, which is a little bit of stroke to the ego, is the neat thing about Leadville is if you finish under 30 hours, they give you this big old belt buckle so you can just show off. But when you finish it 10 times in a row, they give you this thing that's about 4 times as big. So I've got 2 more times that I want to try and get one of those.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. What does your wife think about all of this? Is she all about it, or is she just thinking, come on, that's enough?
There's a lot of eye rolling that goes into it. But I think she knows that being able to go out and do some of these events, I think, makes me happier. I think it makes me, it's a great teacher. Running is a great, great teacher for me. I think it allows me to be a better husband, a better dad. It makes me, I think, a better leader with what I do. And I equate a lot of the things that I've learned from running back to what I do at work and the things that I teach our team.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So we're kind of scaffolding here. We're building. So we started at the marathon, and then we just talked about 100 miles at 10,000 feet of elevation. Can we talk about the Katy Trail right now in Missouri? Because this is the story that sucked me in, hearing about what you did down there in Missouri. So talk about why you did it and what you did.
Sure. I'm going to go one little segue first before we get into that, and that is there's another race that's in Missouri. It's called the Howard Aislinger 24-hour race, and they have these 24-hour endurance races where it's not up in the mountains, it's not in beautiful territory, it's just run around like a track or a 1-mile loop, and you do that as many times as you can in 24 hours. And I've had a little bit of success in one of those, and the furthest I've ever gone is 115 miles in 24 hours. So I knew that I had this ability, either physically or mentally, or something that allowed me to be able to, keep going when I didn't feel like keeping going. And I live out in St. Louis now and very close to the Katy Trail. The Katy Trail is a 237 mile, actually it turns out it's longer than that. I'll get to
245
that
now, yeah.
story. Yes, 237-mile rail to trail. So they took the Katy, Missouri Trail railroad. Actually, the state federal government bought it, turned it into a beautiful trail that stretches from just south of Kansas City to just north of St. Louis. So you go from, well, you can go east to west or west to east. I went from west to east. But I've run on the trail a number of times. I love it. It's very beautiful. But I've only seen the part that's up close to St. Louis. And for probably the better part of a decade, I've just kind of thought, what would it be like to try and run the whole thing? And there's something that has kind of evolved over the past several years that's called the fastest known time. It's called an FKT. And what this is these people go out and take various sections of like trails or roads, something that's popular that people know about, and they try to set the very fastest time they can on foot across that segment. And so there was a fastest known time for the Katy Trail that was set by a couple guys in St. Louis back several years ago of 3 days, 18 hours, 12 minutes and 3 seconds, something like that. And I was thinking, you know what, I could, on a good long weekend, I could probably beat that maybe if I didn't break down. And it's always been kind of a dream, but this year we had all these race cancellations due to COVID. So the Boston Marathon was delayed and then postponed, and then my Silver Rush 50 run out in Leadville, which was going to be this coming weekend, got canceled. Several other races, and then the big one, my A race each year, the Leadville 100, was canceled. So I started having some time that opened up, and I thought, well, you know, if I'm ever going to do this, this is probably the very best time. It's not going to get in the way of my other training. And then we also had this whole epidemic going on that was, you know, having this terrible effect on a whole bunch of industries, but certainly travel, hotel business, airlines are just in the bullseye of all of this. So I thought maybe it would provide some extra motivation for me to do this, and also we could combine it with a way to raise some dollars to get into the pockets of these frontline hospitality team workers, housekeepers, front desk people, people who prepare the food, who are no longer working right now. We'll have them back hopefully at some point as things pick up, but is there some way we can help and let them know we're thinking about it? So that's kind of the genesis of how this came to be. And really just a couple days before I decided to go try it out, number one, I had to convince my wife of that, which was a little bit challenging. But eventually, after she said, okay, if you can find a couple guys to run with you in the middle of the night, then I'll be okay with it and I'll crew you. So we pulled it all together at the last minute.
And so I want to, you just, that last piece, I want to circle back to that, because those people that might not run, or just now hearing about this whole idea of ultras and running 24 hours, or in this case, more than 3 days, we're not just talking about sun up to sundown. I mean, the clock continues to tick, whether it's 1 in the morning or 1 in the afternoon, the time is still going. So you are running literally 3 days here. That's the plan, correct?
That's the plan. And
okay.
When you're doing a 24-hour race or like the Leadville 100, I mean, you don't sleep. The biggest thing you got to be doing is taking in calories and hydration and keeping your mind in the game. But when you start talking about these multi-day events, you generally are trying to catch a few hours sleep every once in a while when you need it to recharge. So that was a part I was not familiar with and had to learn how to manage. But yeah, the clock keeps ticking. It's not just your running time. It's you start here at 4 a.m. on a Friday morning in my case, and it keeps ticking off until you reach the finish line.
So you have this thought brewing in your head for a couple of years, and you start thinking, okay, now is the time. This is something that very few people have ever accomplished, and yet you're thinking, I can do that, and I can do it faster than the people that have done this before. Like, what made you think that A, you could finish, B, you could do it faster when you've never done something like that before?
Well, I didn't know, but that's kind of part of what drives it as an adventure. And, you know, as I told Angie and Trevor, it's like Sir Edmund Hillary said that it wouldn't be much of an adventure if success was guaranteed.
Yeah.
And I always, and the the people that work for me and my kids, I tell them, I think the first thing you got to do is set a goal that captures your imagination. And a really good goal is one that kind of scares you to death, but also gets you really excited. Also, it's a good goal if the first time you tell your wife, she thinks you're absolutely nuts. Um,
I like how you say
so
the first time, because this is a recurring conversation. Yes.
yes, yeah. So I wasn't sure. I'd done the math, so I knew how fast I would have to go. I knew these guys that had set the goal or set the record before were really talented ultra runners. So I didn't know if I could do it, but I thought if I had a good couple of days that I might have a chance at it.
That's impressive. Okay. So you've got it in your head. You finally get your wife's approval. And she says, yes, you can do it if you find some people to run with you at night. And then it was just go on your merry way, have a banana and some water. I mean, how did it play out here?
Sure. So started out at 4 a.m. on a Friday in Clinton, Missouri, so just south of Kansas City. And we had storms brewing. There was lots of lightning. So at the last minute, I'm kind of thinking, oh, do I really want to start in this? And should I delay it? But I don't mind getting wet. That doesn't bother me. But I'm 6'4", so I'm generally the first one that's going to get hit by lightning. So that concerns me a little bit more. But I got out on the trail and started running, and the storms chased us for the first 15, 20 miles, but it was gorgeous. It was beautiful. So ran the first, 25, 30 miles at a decent pace, not marathon pace by any means, but, 9, 10 minutes per mile and just kind of plugging along. And then after that, it really becomes a challenge of taking the calories in, because you start thinking about it. 245 miles, you got to take in like 30,000 calories to keep up with all of that. So a lot of it is eating and staying hydrated, and then it becomes keeping your mind into it. So I did go ahead. You were going to ask a
I was
question.
just gonna say, so I'm trying to bring the audience together here. So this is a point-to-point race. So you're not just running the mile loop here. You're starting one place, finishing somewhere else, and you are running 200 plus miles, but you got to have calories and hydration. How do you get all of that food? Talk us through those logistics a little bit. I mean, are you just strapped with a big backpack, or do you have people staging it for you?
Well, this is where you have to convince your wife that this is a good idea. And so my wife Tammy came out and was very supportive. She would meet me at different trailheads along the way. I mean, I know how far I can go before I need something to eat, and I can fill my pockets with stuff and have some handhelds for water, hydration. And she would just meet me at different points and help me refuel. So that was the toughest part logistically, just making sure that we could hook up together on the trail.
Yeah. Okay. So she's performing her duties, and she is there waiting for. Did she miss any? Were you like looking for her in the distance and she's not there, or any of those moments?
There was one, I think at about mile 220 or so,
Oh my gosh.
where we're close to St. Louis, so she was going to go out and get some breakfast with a friend, and I got to the trailhead a whole lot sooner than I thought I would. I gave her the time to be there, where I thought I would be there, and it turned out I was feeling pretty good, and ended up going faster, and she wasn't there. But a couple of my other ultra buddies had been watching the journey, and they showed up there. And my friend Ron Golan was there at the trailhead instead. And Ron has been trying to convince me to become a vegan for like 20 years. So he saw this as a perfect opportunity. He fed me all these vegan snacks and
at that point you were consuming anything. It all tastes good, right?
Yeah. Bring it in, yeah. So, but they were definitely trail angels. So it's
amazing.
just part of the community. So, and you talked about getting people to run with me in the middle of the night. And I decided on doing this like 2 days before I started, and I was still able to find a couple of guys who, as soon as I asked them, raised their hand and said, "Yeah, I want to be a part of that." It was pretty cool.
That's amazing. So I skipped over about 180 miles there. So you were at the 30-mile mark and outrunning the storms, and it's feeling good. And then I jumped right to mile 220. So talk to us about that in between, because that's a pretty important stretch of the run right there.
Sure. Yeah. So at some point you're going to be fighting all sorts of demons, and your legs are going to hurt. You're going to have blisters to deal with. Every muscle in your body, even though you're using your legs, starts to hurt at some point. And all of it is probably an attempt by your body and your mind to convince you that this is a really dumb idea. And so you end up battling those demons probably more than anything else, the mental demons of trying to get you to stop. So those kind of kick in maybe around mile 50 or 60. I
Or
did
for a lot of people at 4 a.m. when the alarm goes off, they start
well,
kicking in, you know?
yep, that's true. Uh, but I got 115 miles in like the first 30 hours. And at that point I was cooked. I mean, it's as far as I've ever run at one time. And I still wasn't even halfway through this thing.
Oh,
So mentally, that was the time where I was probably the very lowest because I was super tired. I was weaving all over the trail. I'm hallucinating. This is the part where I told them, I mean,
yeah.
trees are talking to me. They're turning into different buildings and shapes and Smurfs. And it's just it's weird. And I was super tired. And I just didn't know how I was going to get back out on the trail after I took a little break. And that was probably one of the big takeaways from this is that, and this is Goggins talks about this, you know, he says that when you're done, you still have 40% less left. And I would agree that's probably the case. I needed more than 40% though.
Were you feeling that? Like, so you went and you crashed temporarily and said, I'm just going to take a couple hours just to get off my feet and sleep. What kind of self-talk was going through your head when you were first hitting the pillow and thinking, I'm just going to take a little rest? Were you thinking, I'm never waking up, I'm not doing this anymore? Or
it was, well, I'm going to wake up in, 2 or 3 hours, but I have no idea what I'm going to feel like. I mean, right now I feel terrible. Every muscle hurts. My head is not in this. And I have, I've made this very public. And I did that for a reason. I think there's a lot of motivation that goes into telling other people what your big goals are, and whether you make it or you crash, you're going to learn something from it. But in this case, by the time I had hit the pillow, I think we had raised close to $30,000, and there's a lot of people that were following this. So it's kind of like, okay, this is not just letting me down now; it's letting a whole bunch of other people down. So that was motivating too. But also, it was like once I woke up, it was like really hard sleep, and I woke up feeling like $1 million.
wow.
And I still can't explain how that all happened, but I mean, I was ready to go at that point.
That's impressive. At any point in that first, we'll call it first half, not quite half, but the first half, did you have people trying to convince you to pull the plug, saying, you don't have to do this? You don't have to? Or did you surround yourself with people saying, you've got this, man? I'm supporting you the whole way.
I have got great enablers. I mean, I've had a few times on the trail where it's like at Leadville, there was 2014. I fell on the trail. Leadville, a lot of it is run on this single track where it's rocks and roots and it's in the dark, and my eyesight's terrible to begin with. And I fell 6 times in the first 20 miles of that race in 2014. I broke a rib, my elbows, my knees are all bleeding, and I busted my nose and I'm bleeding from my face. And I went into the 50-mile mark thinking my wife is going to be there, my pacer who gets to run with you on the way back, my cousin, thinking all these people that know me and love me are going to see that I'm in terrible shape and that I need to quit. I got no sympathy at all. It's like, they go,
blessing and curse, right?
yeah, so you're still moving, get back out there.
That's
And
awesome.
so, yeah, and it's good to surround yourself with people like that, really.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so good. So you wake up after an amazing night's sleep of 3 hours, or day's sleep of 3 hours, and you imagine now another 120 plus miles in front of you. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I was feeling great at that point. So
Okay.
I was running, I was calling people that had donated money to tell them from the trail, thanks for what you're doing. And after about 10 miles, I caught up with my pacer for the night. A pacer, for those of you that don't know what this is, in the ultramarathons, generally in the second half of like a 100-mile race, they'll let you have a pacer, and a pacer is somebody that can, more than anything else, they're like a big babysitter. They just remind you to eat, remind you to keep drinking, and they help keep your head in the game and keep you on the trail so you don't get lost. And I had a guy named Frank Evans, who's an accomplished runner here in the St. Louis area, that joined me and lives down in that area. And so it was a boost to have him join me, and he ran through the entire night with me until the sun came up in the morning. And it was nice to have company, and we did all right through the night. And there's all these critters out there, and you have shine your light on them, and you see these eyeballs shooting back at you. And
you talk about you're seeing demons. You're really seeing demons out there. Yeah.
You're seeing something. I don't know what it was, but it turned out to be a great night. And running at night is a +2 because the days were getting up to 90 degrees, and being able to take advantage of the cooler evenings was a huge +2.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome. So following your Instagram, and people that are curious about this afterwards, I'm going to encourage them to go check out your Instagram story. You show yourself coming to the finish of this amazing race, and you've got your watch out, and it's showing the 237 point, what is it, 237.5, 237.1, but you're not done yet. What ended up happening? Why you had in your head it was going to be 237 miles, but it ended up being 245. I can only imagine those 8 miles being the most horrific 8 miles of your life.
Well, we kind of figured out early on that it was going to be longer than the advertised 237 because there turned out to be a couple of washed out bridges on the trail. So we ended up having to go off the trail onto the roads. And in both, this happened 2 times, both in the middle of the night, about 1 in the morning. And the first one we knew about, so it wasn't a big surprise. But when you're out running on the highways at 1 in the morning, anytime you see a car out there, they probably don't have a really good reason for being out there. So it's a little bit weird running on the roads that time of night. But that added mileage in both of those cases. And then there was a detour around Sedalia. So it just kind of added up to 245.1 miles at the end.
Wow. And what was your official time or your unofficial time, or what is it, official or unofficial? How does this work? I mean, it's
unofficial.
garment.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a fastest known time, and it was 3 days, 14 hours, and 6 minutes.
That is insane. That is absolutely insane. Just doing that math. So I'm going to rewind back in Memorial Day. I went out and ran 33 miles and I was done. I thought it was the most epic thing I've ever done in my life, but I was done. One day, 33 miles. You're doing basically 60, 65 miles a day. No, more than that. You're doing more than 70 miles a day to go out and get this thing done for 3 days in a row. It's crazy, absolutely crazy. But yeah, you did it. Why? I mean, it can't just be the challenge. It can't just be I wanted to see if I could do it. There's got to be more.
I don't know. I think that's a pretty good reason, actually. I mean, I think obviously combining it with this whole idea of trying to help take care of some of the frontline hospitality workers that were hurting was an added bonus. But I think even without that motivation, I would have found a way to try and do this. I think it's just more this morbid fascination with what's going to happen if you push your body, past where it's ever been before, and remind yourself that you can do hard things and probably do more than you think you can.
I actually love that answer. That actually was all there was to it. I just wanted to see if I could do it. I wanted to put a challenge out there and go for it. Sometimes that's all we need. We just need to throw the gauntlet down and say, game on, let's do this. Let's see what we can do.
I mean, I'm not writing a book, and I really didn't expect anybody to be interested in this. So at the end of the day, it's like, who's going to care? There has to be some intrinsic motivation there.
Well, it's changing lives. I mean, I'm a little old guy up in Michigan that heard this story, and it has fueled something in me. I'm thinking about it all the time. And I'm talking about it to people all the time right now because it's such an epic story of just, I'm going to go out there and do the best I can. I'm going to do something that's hard because it's hard. That's it. No other reason. It's hard. I'm going to challenge myself and see what I can do. I think that's amazing. We talked about the fact that, you're not retired from running. You did this huge, amazing thing, but there's always something more for you. It feels like there's always the next thing that's coming, whether races are canceled everywhere or not. You've got something brewing in your mind. I can tell already. What's the next big thing for you?
Well, I don't know. I don't have any big, epic plans for doing 246 miles next weekend. I keep going back to the same races over and over again, because every time you do one, they're a challenge and you're trying to beat yourself. There's always going to be somebody faster than you. There's always going to be somebody that can run further. So you're really competing against yourself. And I think at this point in my career of running, it's more to be able to continue to stay in good enough shape to enjoy this while I can. And it kind of marks the seasons for me. So, having this Howard Aislinger 24-hour race in March, and Boston in April, and Grandma's Marathon in June, and the Leadville race in August, and Chicago in October, just kind of informs how I approach the year to a certain extent, and gives me the goals and motivation to kind of keep going. Will there be some other, big, long epic run at some point in the future? Maybe. I'm sure after this all sinks in for a while and you start forgetting again, like you did after
Yeah.
that first
It takes
marathon, how
about
you
9 months,
felt.
I've heard, right?
Yeah, that's right. Will there be something else that comes up that captures my imagination? Maybe, but I don't know what that is at this point.
Oh, wow. That's cool. That's cool. I'm curious, do you log your miles? Do you journal, reflect on like your training and all of that?
I log them. I don't know that I've ever looked back at them, but
Okay.
I keep track. Uh, and I look at that piece of paper and know that if it's blank, that, it makes me feel a little guilty inside that I didn't put the work in.
Okay.
But I also like to see, how many miles I run each week and each year. And it kind of helps me better understand kind of where I'm at on my journey.
If you had a ballpark, how many miles do you think you've run in your lifetime?
Well, I really started keeping track in the year 2000,
Okay.
and pretty much every year since then, I've run at least 2,000 miles a year, and I've probably averaged close to 2,700 miles. So
Okay.
it's basically, it comes down to the past 20 years, probably averaging about 7 miles per day.
So you've run around the world twice so far, just in the
Yeah.
last 20 years. That's impressive.
Yes. Thank you.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. Now, Eric, your story is it's inspiring to me. Not just the running, but just the idea of the human side of this, that you are a guy out there just doing stuff just to do stuff. I think that is so cool. You're not out there making millions of dollars from running. You don't have the big endorsement deals. You're a working family man that's out there continuing to challenge himself to grow, to get stronger, and to just do things because they're hard. It's a powerful, powerful life lesson for all of us. And I'm wondering, and I kind of warned you about this, but throughout all of that, what would you say is like the mic drop, the thing that you want people to remember from your story, whether it's your human story, your running story, your personal story, professional? What is the thing that we all need to latch onto and say, this is what I want you to remember from all of this?
Well, I'll share something that to a certain extent is going to sound a little bit cliche, but the more I think about it, I think it's so true. Ken Clover, the gentleman who I had mentioned had started that Leadville 100 race, he will talk with us runners before we head off the next morning. And one of the things he always shares with us is you're better than you think you are, and you can do more than you think you can. And I just think that fits certainly for that epic race, but also pretty much everything else in life. So I think it just is a reminder that you can do hard things. I think one of the other things that I learned from this adventure and all these really long races is you don't really do them by yourself. You might be able to do a 5K or a 10K or even a marathon without having a really good support network. But when you start doing the ultramarathons, 100 miles, and certainly this Katy Trail run of 245 miles, you lean on other people, and you start to realize that community is really important, and they make you stronger. They cheer you on, and you cheer them on, and everybody gets better. So I think that's good. The other thing that I'd take away from this particular event was we raised $42,500 so far for frontline team members. Those are going into the pockets of people who aren't working and getting a paycheck right now. And it just made me realize that there's a lot of really generous people that understand the pain that others are going through and want to help out. And it was really gratifying just to see that all these strangers decided, hey, yeah, I'm going to throw in a few bucks because I know that person who cleaned my room, or that person who checked me in or served me my breakfast. And they've made me happier and served me, and I want to try and give back in some way. So it reaffirmed my faith in human nature, I think, in many ways too.
That's good. You said so far in that sentence. So can people still give? Can they still donate?
Sure. We have it's a GoFundMe charities account. And it's set up so that the dollars go directly to the Above and Beyond Foundation. It's a 503c. Everything you put into it is tax deductible. And you can find it just by going to GoFundMe and put in Katy Trail Helping Hospitality Run. So if anybody's interested, they could go look that up. And there's a video and some updates on it too that they might find entertaining.
That's great. And we'll have all that stuff linked in the show notes. So if you're one of those people listening or watching and you actually scroll down and actually click the notes, it'll be there. Go and donate, because there are amazing people out there who work super hard for us on a daily basis that are struggling right now. So give back. Every little bit is going to help somebody. And we all know that that comes back and benefits us as well. So do your
Absolutely.
part. That's awesome. Eric, you are, again, I know I say it and it's going to sound like I'm blowing smoke, but man, you are absolutely incredible. You are inspirational. You are powerful. You are just killing life. And I'm hearing this story and resonating with so much of it, so much that I want to go out there and do. You know, it's that idea of, it's hard. Somebody else did something that's hard. I can go do something that's hard. I don't think I'm ever going to go out there and try to beat you in any of these things. That's not the challenge, but I want to go out there and beat myself in so many things in life because of what you're doing. So I just want to thank you for inspiring me, motivating me, and anybody else that's listening to this that says, hey, you know what? I'm actually going to set my alarm tomorrow morning and wake up and go for a run around the block. I'm going to go out there and sign up for my first marathon as soon as this thing ends, and whatever. They're going to sign up to do something that's hard simply because it's hard and they want to see what they can do. So I appreciate you just dropping that down there and saying, there are hard things out there, but you're harder, you're stronger. Go find something and challenge yourself. That's awesome.
Well, and it's a great point, and it doesn't have to be running. I mean, it could
Yeah.
be you find what it is that kind of turns you on. That's that challenge you want to take on, and it could be going back to school. It could be, you know, whatever it is. You know, having the award-winning quilt for the Paducah Quilting Festival or whatever it might be. But you know, people can find that challenge, and I think it's part of what keeps drawing you forward and moving forward and enjoying life.
That's it. That's it. Well, I appreciate it. Again, if you're listening to this, watching this, and you've made it this far, check out those show notes at the bottom. Donate, give, check out his Instagram story if you want to see pictures that match the story. If you want to just learn a little bit more about the crazy epic adventures that he's been on and some of the runs he's been on, some of the things he's seen, check out Eric's Instagram story, and I'll have that link down at the bottom. He's Lead Feet on Instagram, which is pretty awesome, pretty cool. I love that name. So go check it out. Eric, thank you so much. Listeners, thank you so much for listening to this, and hopefully you're inspired to go out there and do something epic.
Dave, thanks so much. I enjoyed it.